Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to talk about a review that's been very long overdue. But that said, I can give you some very long-term thoughts about what I believe the mini LED technology has to offer with the best of the best offering from Samsung in 2023. This is the Samsung Odyssey G8. This is a 4K 240Hz VESA display HDR 1000 certified mini LED monitor with HDMI 2.1 support. Now, this is an older product. I haven't had a chance to get around to reviewing it, but I have been using this almost as a daily driver off and on for the last, well, let's just say nearly 2 years now. So what I want to do here is talk about the benefits of what I believe the mini LED technology brings to the table, why I believe it's the superior tech if you're looking for a monitor and a display for your desktop, for gaming, and all around any kind of usage for that matter, over OLED particularly, which is very popular and gaining a lot of ground. There's many reasons why you'd want to go with a technology like this, but here I'm just running, in the introduction here, this is the benchmark using the 4K 240Hz adaptive refresh rate G-Sync enabled display here in 10-bit Windows color at 4K full native resolution using an RTX 4070. And as you can see here, this game is very playable, and not only that, it's very enjoyable here, with the highlights being absolutely bright and the dark areas being as dark as they can be. Now, it's not going to be OLED dark, of course, but keep in mind I have a huge studio light on top of this monitor, flooding into the environment here. So in a typical office or home environment, you'll have a lot dimmer, hopefully ambient lighting or ability to control the ambient lighting, so you'll see the picture be much better even in your native environment. All right, before we jump in the review here, just some housekeeping here. Please click on the like button, click the subscribe button, and click that notification bell to be notified when there's new content available here. And also always find descriptions or links in the description below, as well as discount codes forever available if you wish to purchase these products. It really goes a long way to helping support this channel. And without further ado, this was a purchase that I made out of my own pocketbook. Nobody has provided this to me for review. That said, all of the thoughts in this will be my own, and nobody has had editorial review of the content herein. Let us begin. Alright, so let me just give you a little bit of an overview of the feature set of this particular display. This is called the Samsung Odyssey Neo G8, the 32-inch model here, the 4K UHD 240Hz display. And this one comes with a mini LED, actually quantum dot panel with mini LED here for a total of 1196 zones. Sorry, I thought it was 1152, but it's actually 1196. And it comes with 10-bit color. Of course, this one also has 1000 nits of HDR with the VESA HDR 1000 certification. Now, Samsung touts Quantum HDR 2000. I really don't know what that means because it never seems to hit that figure. I've never seen it hit 2000 nits, but this is what Samsung claims on their marketing page. I'm not really sure how you get to that. I've played around with menu quite a bit. I've owned this device for nearly 2 years now. I don't know how to even access that display. So other than marketing gimmick, I think that's really all that it stands for. The other thing is it has 1 millisecond refresh rate. Of course, you have to tweak the settings and adjust a few things here to get that 1 millisecond response time rate. The other thing is it can run in HDR simultaneously while operating at 240Hz refresh rate, which is uncommon for prior displays or displays that are on the lower end of the spectrum. Keep in mind, this is the top spec display for 2023, and also probably one of the best mini LED displays out there from Samsung at least. And of course, it has adaptive refresh rate technology in the form of AMD FreeSync Premium Pro, which is the top tier and very premium offering from AMD, which means you have to have a color gamut, you have to have a true HDR nits brightness and certification, you have to have a certain amount of refresh rate. So all of those parameters are met here by this display, thus earning it the AMD FreeSync Premium Pro badging and certification, of course. And it has a 1000R curvature for that 32-inch display. So when you're sitting at the ergonomic distance of arm's length, you're going to have a very nice viewing experience here, and it really fills out your field of view very nicely. The other kind of highlights here, it does have RGB. There's a little bit of RGB on the front here. You can see at the bottom of the left and right hand side of the display here in the bezels. It has some LED, and it of course has an LED light ring around the back of the display as well. We'll show that off a little bit later. And being that this is a mini LED display, this is a matte display, so you're not going to have to deal with any kind of reflections. The nominal brightness here in SDR mode, however, is 350 nits of brightness. When you do boost it into HDR, it easily surpasses or jumps right up 2000 nits there for the HDR viewing experience. Now it has lots of viewing ports as well. Of course, there's lots of features that are built into this. For example, an auto switch. There's some wide field, or excuse me, widescreen viewing as well. So if you like to play on 21:9 aspect ratio, there's a toggle that allows you to do that. Of course, it reduces the overall resolution of the display, but that means you can run in that particular resolution, which is uncommon for these type of displays to be able to do all in one. And that stand here, as you can see, this is a very large display. The stand here does offer tilt, height adjustment, and even pivot. So if you wanted, you could use this 32-inch display, which is absolutely massive, and pivot it into vertical orientation. Not quite sure why you'd want to do that, but that is an option that you have available to you. Some of the other highlights of this, as I mentioned, this is a VA panel, 300 to 350 nits nominal brightness in SDR, has HDR10 Plus certification, HDR10 Plus gaming, 1196 mini LED zones, 95% of DCI-P3 color coverage, and as I said, 10-bit color here over DisplayPort or over HDMI. This is a quantum dot panel, got lots of other goodies built into this as well. It does not have, however, what I think I would have liked to seen is DisplayPort 2.1. Of course, keep in mind that certification only got ratified late last year in 2024, and we're just now starting to see monitors with DisplayPort 2.1. But we do have two HDMI 2.1 ports for that full 4K 240 Hz refresh rate over that. There is a USB hub as well on the back. You get two USB ports with the an uplink there from your PC, but those are just USB 3.0. You're not going to get 3.1 or 3.2 Gen 2, any of those kinds of fast speeds. There are no speakers, but it does have speaker pass-through for headphones to plug it in quite easily. Lots of mode here for different picture modes. We'll talk about those in just a moment here. It has a proprietary stand, but as I mentioned, it does also support, with an adapter that comes included in the box, the ability to wall mount this thing using a standard base 100 by 100 display, or excuse me, a wall mount or an arm mount. Keep in mind that this is a heavy monitor as well, not just big. It weighs roughly around, I believe, 13 kilos, 12.2 kilos is the exact spec in the figure in the spec, which means you're going to need a very sturdy arm to be able to mount this if you're going to be using that particular route for mounting this display. So I think that's all for an overview here. Next thing we'll do is we'll show you around the back. We'll show you the stand capabilities, show you the port setup, and then finally we'll talk about the overall menu system, how you actually navigate and configure some of the menu options on this particular display, before we go further into further game testing and giving you my opinions of how usability has been with this for the last 2 years. All right, as I mentioned, this has a 1000R curvature to the display panel here. So let me just... All right, as I mentioned earlier, this has a 1000R curvature to the display here. So it's not very curved, but it is slightly curved. It is noticeable though that it has a curved display panel. I don't know if that's just a gimmick. I believe it does have some aspect to play for usability and ergonomics, but it is what it is. So we're looking at the very offside here. VA panels, it starts to get a little shaded towards the right-hand side there. Perhaps maybe not as well in terms of the backlight there. Not really sure how to explain that. VA panels don't have quite as good viewing angles as do with IPS panels, but nonetheless, this is still a very, very good display here, even despite being a VA panel alone. Now, if we come around the back here, I want to show you this stand. This stand is actually very, very large. As you can see here, it takes up a lot of space on the desk. It is proprietary. And the way it hooks up onto the back of the display here, and of course, you can also see there's the RGB on the back. We have an RGB ring here that nicely reflects onto the wall behind you. It's a little bit of ambient and ambiglow lighting or whatever, similar to what you get from Philips. I still have this sticker left on here from the housing and packaging. But yeah, this stand allows it to basically slide up, so you can do height adjustment. It goes quite high off of the desk. So if I show you around from the front here, it gets quite tall, leaving lots of display or space underneath the display itself. And of course, you can also pivot this thing. It's extremely large. I mean, I don't know why you would want to do that, but you do have the option if you want to pivot this display into a portrait orientation and use it in that particular configuration. Now, let's go back around to the back here. I want to show you some of the ports. I hope that this will come out clearly. It's a little bit challenging here to show them from this angle, but I'll try to talk about them and point to them as I go here. So on the left-hand side here, We get two HDMI 2.1 ports. I have a display port connected right now. Currently, this is DisplayPort 1.4, not the latest DisplayPort 2.1 connector. We then have next to that a USB port, which is used for firmware updates, specifically a service port. Next to that, we have a USB uplink port, which allows you to connect your USB 3 connection from your PC to get an additional two extended USB ports. And finally, we have a headphone pass-through jack and the DC input for this particular display. If you're looking for a desktop monitor that has lots of adjustability, I don't think you will be shortchanged here from Samsung with any of the options that are available on this particular display. Height adjustment, tilt adjustment, and of course pivot side to side, so you can pivot this quite a bit. As you can see here, it allows you to really adjust with that stand and the positioning of this monitor. Now, one thing I do not like, however, is there's so much wobble with this particular stand. I don't know why it was so difficult for Samsung to get this right, considering it takes up a lot of space on the desk with these legs and the way that the monitor panel is curved. It actually takes up quite a bit of space on your desk. So if you have a small desk, it's going to eat in about, looking at this here, maybe 16 inches roughly of space on your desk, which is quite a bit if you're strapped for space. That said, if you sit in front of it at an ergonomic viewing distance, as I said, your field of view is going to be nicely filled. And we can see here that in HDR mode, 4K 240 Hertz over the display port, the image quality is just stunning. Now, the menu on this monitor is accessed with a button here. There's a jog dial kind of joystick with 4 buttons around it on the side here. Underneath this Samsung labeling and housing at the bottom of the display. If you press the button in the center, you get this menu toggle. We'll step up to the menu here, and you can see we're currently operating at 240 Hertz refresh rate. Adaptive sync is turned off because that's really the only way you can access these custom picture modes. And as I said, there's a few picture modes built in here: FPS, RTS, RPG, sports mode, RGB, this is 100% sRGB coverage, and of course cinema mode. And there's even a dynamic contrast mode that can be turned on once you enable some other features here to get that. Now, as far as gaming is concerned, this does have a few different options. So response rate here can be controlled, and you have to go into the extreme MBR option in order to get that 1 millisecond advertised response rate. Keep in mind though, that's going to cause some overshoot. It's not going to give you the best image, the sharpest image and the clearest image, but it is what it is. It's a trade-off. So if you're playing those kinds of games, you'll know that you're able to compromise with that. Adaptive sync, as I mentioned, FreeSync Premium Pro is on board. That's the top of the stack from AMD's FreeSync line. I currently have this turned off. Ultra Game View allows you to actually play 21:9 games. It kind of gives you a black border at the top and the bottom, and you can play in that resolution. And we also have some input lag here adjustments. So there's a black equalizer, aim point, and the infinity core lighting, which is these lights here at the front of the monitor, and of course at the rear of the display, that RGB ring. We do have picture-in-picture mode, which allows us to have a lot of different configurations. We can use another source to have a picture-in-picture. We can control the positioning and the size of it as well, and the screen ratio and source, which means you can actually hook up something like an iPad if you're wanting to do something, and you can use that to draw on it, and you'll get a 4:3 aspect ratio on the display with PIP. On the on-screen display, you can connect some basic system settings here and some other stuff about volume adjustment and everything. Keep in mind, again, just a reminder, the volume here is just a pass-through for the audio. This does not have any built-in speakers. You'll have to pass the audio through headphones, and this will control the volume for the pass-through there for your headphones. All right, just to give my thoughts here about the actual differences between Mini LED and OLED, having owned both particular devices, I believe Mini LED offers higher peak brightness, is lower cost, although that's debatable considering that there were very few options that actually made it into the monitor landscape and ecosystem for PC monitors with Mini LED technology. So it kind of made them even more exclusive than OLEDs for that matter. We did have OLEDs come onto the scene in 2023, some of the 240 Hertz displays that we saw, 32-inch QHD displays, but we now have got the 27-inch 4K UHD panels at 240 Hertz, and of course larger 32-inch panels as well. So I would say the cost is kind of a toss-up, but with Mini LED there are some cons as well. You can have potential blooming. There's certain areas where you might see blooming on this particular display, but because of the more than sufficient 1196 dimming zones, I never really had to notice that, or nor did it bother me for that matter. Because it is Mini LED, you get a matte panel versus OLED, which is generally shiny, more bright, covered with glass. OLEDs have typical brightness about 250 to 300 nits, at least in the last 2 years, which means in the with the exception of the darkest indoor light controlled environment, you're going to get lots of reflections and light bouncing off, and it's just going to be a very dim experience. I've seen them in person, and I really did not like what I saw. The HDR OLED TVs, by comparison, cannot get up to 800 nits, 700 nits, depending on which iteration you have. The newer TVs can go, in fact, even higher, well over 1,000 nits. That display tech, however, has not trickled down to PC monitors. Perhaps we'll see that in 2026, but for now, if you're considering an OLED monitor, keep in mind that the brightness is going to be quite low. You're going to have, lots of glare and issues with the glass panel that's covered it. However, because of that, you get better saturation, better color representation, and better visual experience. If you like immersive cinema, if you like immersive games and color-rich visual displays, then you're going to love OLED displays for gaming. It really is a toss-up, and I believe now with so many entrants coming into the OLED marketplace, the prices will significantly start to drop. And as I said, mini LED displays are still very rare, with the exception of Corsair, perhaps an off-brand, a Xiaomi, and maybe the Samsung monitor. There really isn't a lot of option or selections here for mini LED displays in the PC desktop monitor space. So I think those are things that are noteworthy that I've experienced over the last 2 years. Perhaps you were or were not aware of them. Leave me a comment leave me a comment below to let me know if these are things you had considered, or if you learned something and now you're going to swap your mind or swap your choice one from the other. If you were leaning towards mini LED or OLED and now you're leaning toward the other due to this information, I'd love to know. To continue showing off the chops of this monitor, I want to show you here one more game. This is Cyberpunk 2077 with all of the latest updates here. As you can see, I'm running at the native 4K resolution with HDR10 picture quality mode enabled, and of course HDR10 plus gaming mode enabled as well, since this monitor is certified for HDR10 plus gaming. And for the settings here, we're going to run in a ray tracing ultra mode. We have DLSS super resolution enabled. We're going to use a new convolutional neural network model here for our scaling. We'll set the settings here to quality, so we're focused more on the visual fidelity of the display here. We'll turn on our ray reconstruction, of course, and we have frame generation turned on as well. So with this set here, we're going to hit apply for our settings, and let's run the benchmark here. I want you guys to see the HDR chops of this particular monitor. And right off the bat here, I have to say that this is looking stunning. The highlights are popping. They're very, very visually stunning to look at. They're exquisite in terms of detail, the fog, the lighting effects here, the reflections off of the floor and the water. This really is a showcase for HDR and any HDR displays that you may be considering. And looking at this here, the neon lights absolutely pop. They're visually so bright. It really gives the impression that you are looking at some neon lights here. And as you go through this door here, you're going to see the contrast between the darks and the brights. It gets absolutely bright. 1,000 plus nits of brightness here, and as we venture outdoors, the reflections, just the fog, some of the smoke effects here, the lighting, the reflections, the dark areas, and the highlights on this monitor are rendered so naturally well. I think from any of the monitors that I've used in the past few years, if you want an HDR monitor, you've got to go at least HDR10, and this one really stuns in terms of mini LED fidelity. The text is sharp as well. There's no white issues. Of course, those have been resolved with OLED, but a very good show here for this monitor. In order to conclude this review here, I'm going to wrap up while you guys enjoy some more benchmark videos here. So this is Monster Hunter Wilds running in 4K native resolution on my 4070 with the 9900X. And I'm running in the high preset here with frame generation turned on. We're getting some pretty good playable frame rates here. So basically to conclude, and of course this game is one of those HDR enabled games, so everything here should look fantastic, visually stunning. And that is certainly the case here. If you're looking for a display that can pretty much do it all, has a kitchen sink in terms of the features that includes 8 AMD FreeSync Premium Pro, has HDMI 2.1 support, has DCI-P3 great color gamut coverage, sRGB full color gamut coverage, is 32-inch, is a curved display, has a 1000R curve, has some RGB on the front and the rear of this display, is absolutely massive, visually immersive, and fills your field of view entirely, then this is going to be the display for you. Now keep in mind, since release it has come down in price a little bit. When I initially purchased, the retail price of this unit was $1,799 Canadian. It has dropped and been on sale multiple times for around $13.99. That's the price that I paid for this monitor, and now there is currently sales. But considering that some of the OLED monitors that have come onto the scene, they're going to present stiff competition to this display, even with its mini LED technology, better brightness, better text fidelity, better overall rendition of HDR. I believe OLEDs may win out in the long term because they're just simply starting to flood the market. However, if you are one of those unique folks who love the actual mini LED technology as I do, And I believe it to be the superior tech because you don't have to worry about any burn-in issues or any longevity issues with the pixels burning out over time, because OLED displays do degrade over time and the pixels will start to dim. Then that is something you should be taking note of. With this technology, you don't have to worry about any of that. You're going to have very, very good visual fidelity throughout the ownership of this display. You won't have to worry about any of those issues that are tantamount to having an OLED display on your desktop. And of course, if you can find this on sale or if you can find this on the secondhand market, you may be able to get a fantastic deal on this display. If you need something smaller though, then unfortunately the Neo G8 was only offered in this one singular size, 32 inches, 4K 240 Hertz. There are newer models from Samsung that are offered in 27-inch and 32-inch sizes, but those are OLED panels. So take it for what it's worth. I really love the mini LED technology, the matte display, everything else it has to offer for me has been absolutely fantastic. However, there are a few downsides. It's heavy. The stand wobbles quite a bit. If you look at the actual SDR display, it's plenty bright. It's more saturated than the HDR display when you enable that in Windows. But I believe that has to do with more with software, Windows reproduction of color and rendition of color spaces as opposed to the monitor's tech itself. I would have loved to seen a KVM switch. That's one feature I believe is missing for a monitor at this particular price point, but it includes a USB hub and lots of other amenities here to keep you satiated. So if you're looking for a monitor for the long haul, willing to spend premium bucks, then I think this will be the monitor for you. All right, that's all I have to say about this review. If you enjoyed this content, please click like, please click subscribe, and click that notification bell so you're the first to know when there's new content available here. And of course, always check the links in the description below. Wherever possible, I try to provide purchase links for affiliate channels that really help the channel out, and it's a great way to offer support so we can continue to bring you more content in the future. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.